Welcome to Wax On, Wax Off, the podcast where a teenager gains wisdom and insight from pioneers and innovators that have come before in search of how to win in every facet of life and change the world. I'm your host, Solomon Cole, and let's get into today's episode. So today's guest is one of the top functional medicine doctors in the galaxy. He's a New York Times best-selling author, and he's my dad. Welcome to Wax On, Wax Off, the first ever modern-day Mr. Miyagi, Dr. Will Cole.
Thank you, my friend, my son.
Yeah, you say you, my friend, a lot.
So here's the deal. I'm so freaking proud of you.
Thank you.
For doing this podcast and you formulating the format and putting your heart. It's really just an outer extension of who you are. So it is really an authentic thing. And to be doing it at this age, I'm just extremely proud of you.
Thank you. I mean, that's the whole point of the podcast, is from like the younger generation's perspective, really, to be showing what it's like to be in the younger generation and trying to glean from old people like you.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So for people who don't know you, what is it that you do?
So he said it's something about me being the best functional medicine doctor in the galaxy. So some galactic work. That's all I'm going to say. No, anyway. So if functional medicine, if for you to break it down, first thing is we interpret labs using a thinner reference range. So what that means is that people go get their labs done and they want to find out, hey, how can I optimize my health? Or can you explain why I'm feeling the way that I do? And they're compared to this X to Y interval, this reference range on their lab. And we get that lab reference range largely from a statistical bell curve average of people who go to that specific lab. People that go to lab, sadly, are people that are going through some stuff. They're going through some health problems. So there's a lot of people that intuitively know something's off here. Something's off with my health. And the doctor comes back and says, run the basic labs, and they say, everything's fine. You're just depressed. You're just getting older. You're just, take this antidepressant, see you later. But what they're unintentionally telling their patient is you're a lot like the other people with health problems that we're comparing you to. So in functional medicine, we're looking optimal, not average. Where does vibrant wellness reside? Then we realize in functional medicine that everybody's different and unique. And there's a lot of variables to consider, the context of it. So we talk about bio-individuality and really customizing healthcare to the individual. And then we run more comprehensive labs. So we're looking at underlying issues like underlying gut problems and toxicity issues and hormonal imbalances and nutrient deficiencies and trauma and stress and shame and mental, emotional, spiritual components, and how they can be literally stored in our cells, dysregulating our nervous system, raising inflammation levels. So there's a lot of tools within our toolbox, but we use food as medicine based on the individual. Even healthy foods, what works for one person may not work for the next person. We use natural medicines, herbs, botanicals. We use mind-body tools like somatic practices and things like EMDR we would refer out to, and trauma work and breath work and meditation, to medications when needed, right? To really be a both and approach to healthcare, not an either or.
Yeah, I mean, this is you discovering this, not necessarily being the first person to discover, but one of the first, and doing it online, which is, we'll get into that. How did you, what's your success story? Like, you're one of the most successful functional medicine doctors in the galaxy. So how did you get there? Like, has this always been a passion of yours? Is it something that you discovered? Yeah. When did you discover this passion?
So we started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers in the world over a decade ago, 13 plus years at this point of recording. But you're right. So that was what I was the first of. But functional medicine is, even before me, it's still relatively a newer term, right? But in short, it's birthed out of sort of an evidence-based alternative medicine, conventional medicine hybrid. It's, again, this sort of amalgamation of, I think, of the best of both worlds, both conventional medicine and alternative medicine, holistic medicine, wellness, nutrition. So how I found it was really growing up, always being fascinated by health and wellness. So I used my first job was at 16 years old. I worked at the Finish Line at the mall, at Westmoreland Mall in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Shout out to Greensburg. And I would use my paycheck and spend a lot of it on different health foods that I read about, superfoods, books, like all the latest nutrition, wellnessy stuff, like biohacking before biohacking was a thing. I'd like just be so excited to go and like home and like try it. And yeah, so I was always interested in that from a young age, and then wanting to be formally trained in this. And then it came out here where we're recording in LA.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you lean more towards the natural side of health and trying to solve things with like a natural solution.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say is like, what's the difference between natural health and conventional like medicine
Mm-hmm.
and natural medicine? And what do you think is there a better one?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Well, I don't think there's a better one. It's just a matter of, like, back to my earlier point of a both and approach, not an either or. Like, can we really, like, what's your most effective option that is causing you the least amount of side effects, preferably none? And for some people, they have to be on medications, or medications fit that criteria, where it is the most effective option causing them the least amount of side effects. It just so happens that most of the time, or a lot of the time, medications alone aren't fitting that criteria. They may be a piece of the puzzle for some people, but it's not the totality of how they can live their vibrant self, like their vibrant life, and gain vibrant wellness. So I to me, I don't have a God complex about these things. So to me, it's what gets the patient to meet their goals. And that should be our litmus test. So for a lot of our patients, like for example, if someone has low thyroid function, they may have to be on a thyroid replacement hormone, but we have to deal with all the other issues around that, like their gut health and lowering inflammation levels and working on other hormonal imbalances and nutrient deficiencies that makes their thyroid work well. We're dealing with their autoimmune issue, of which triggered the Hashimoto's, if it's a Hashimoto's case for them. So the point being is we should all just, in my opinion, figure out what is their most effective option that is the most safe and the least amount of side effects.
Yeah. Wow. On this train of thought, talking about health, you are releasing a book. It's coming out soon. And for people out there who don't know the book or what it's about, what is it about?
It's called Gut Feelings, and the subtitle is Healing the Shame-Fueled Relationship Between What You Eat and How You Feel. So we're talking about both gut and feelings, physiological, i.e. the physical gut, and the feelings, the mental, emotional, spiritual stuff, and how both of those compartments of life impact health issues, impact things like autoimmune issues or mental health issues like anxiety and depression, brain fog and fatigue. So it's really a deep dive into what I see play out in patients' lives for the past 13 years plus, and how we can get people better. So I'm exploring sort of my favorite functional medicine protocols, both for the gut, i.e. the physical side, and then the mental, emotional, feeling, spiritual side.
Yeah. Mental health is, I would say, an epidemic in my generation. And I think it's such a big problem, and there's not like one cause. It's not like, oh, you do this and you have mental health issues. Like, it is an epidemic. And I guess, what would you say is like the most common cause of mental health?
Mental health issues?
Yeah.
Most common cause of mental health issues, I would say, would be inflammation, in short. That's an easy answer. But the bigger question is, what's causing the inflammation? And that's what I'm really exploring in Gut Feelings and in my work with my patients and in my other books. But really, the most deep exploration of the facets that are driving that really have to go into this book and Gut Feelings. So it's the physical and the mental, emotional, spiritual. So inflammation is not inherently bad. It's a product of our immune system, but it's chronic inflammation that's associated in the scientific literature, in the medical journals, of what's causing dysfunction of the brain and neurotransmitter signaling issues and receptor site issues and communication differences between the gut and the brain and the hormonal axis. It's a confluence of factors, but the underlying commonality is chronic inflammation.
And what is inflammation? What is inflammation?
Inflammation is a product of the immune system. It fights off viruses and bacteria, and there's many different types of inflammation. So it's like different interleukins, different cytokines, different proteins that are all basically signaling molecules or inflammatory, pro-inflammatory amino acids that are part of our body's immune system, or part of our body's defense mechanisms, I should say. So if you have a virus, the inflammation will fight it off or be used to fight it off. If you have a bacterial infection, inflammation will be used to fight it off. So inflammation is not inherently bad, but it's when inflammation becomes chronic, that is what it's associated with just about every health problem under the sun.
What are some mental health tips and tricks that you have to make us happier, to help us get out of our anxiety or our depression?
Well, I talk about them in the book. There's really over 42 different tips in the book that I found to be the most effective for people. There's 21 gut action items, i.e. physical action items, and 21 feeling action items. So I'll give you some. One is soups and stews. So your gut is your second brain. 95% of serotonin is made in the gut. 50% of dopamine is made in the gut and stored in the gut. So our happy, joyous, pleasure neurotransmitters are made in the gut largely and stored in the gut. So one way to support the gut, which is the second brain, it's formed from the same fetal tissue. So when babies are growing in their mother's womb, the gut and brain are formed from that same fetal tissue, and they're linked for the rest of our life through what's known as the gut-brain axis, or the connection between the two. So when you are nourishing your gut, you're nourishing your second brain, which in turn crosstalks and communicates with your first brain. And in some ways, it's the controller of your actual brain. So there's a protocol that we use for our patients called the GAPS protocol. They have a lot of anxiety and depression and brain fog and fatigue and ADHD and autism spectrum issues. It's called GAPS. It's an acronym that stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome, or Gut and Physiology Syndrome, either one. It's interchangeable. But specific to mental health, it's typically Gut and Psychology Syndrome. And it's lots of bone broth, soups, and stews, and sort of like spending periods of weeks and months for some people in sort of these brothing and souping phases. And then you can have vegan broths too, like sort of plant-based, like seaweed broths and galangal ginger broths, vegetable broths, mushroom broths that also can be nourishing too. But a combination between the two, with vegetables and protein and things that are almost like pre-digested. The vegetables cooked in soups and stews, and the foods that are the materials, the ingredients within the soups and stews are gentle on the gut, to sort of like a proverbial siesta for your gut microbiome, your second brain, which will calm down systemic inflammation and help not just the second brain, but your actual brain as well.
In the book, you talk about Shinrin-yoku.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by it. But for those who don't know, what is it? What are the benefits of it?
Sure. So Simonyoku is a Japanese term, and it translates into English as forest bathing. So it's using nature. What the researchers in Japan and South Korea are really looking at is using nature as a medicine and nature as a meditation. So it's taking nature in with all of your senses, the sort of immersive sensorial experience of going into the forest, like maybe only making it a few feet in a longer period of time, and taking it in with your eyesight and smelling it in and the sounds and the stillness of all of it. But it's immersive and it's therapeutic. And researchers have shown that sort of the natural essential oils that are emitted from the plants of the forest have a modulating effect on on the human immune system, i.e., it balances inflammation levels out, it boosts mood, it improves health markers across the board. That's just these essential oils, let alone sort of the sight of it all and the sound of it all, which is certainly sort of vision medicine and sound medicine to forest bathing as well.
What do you think on, like, for those people who aren't in a place where they can go out and just walk in the woods? Are there any other alternatives that they can?
These are good questions.
Yeah,
these are good questions. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you.
So yes, any green space, right? It's like if you live in the city, you can go to a small like community park. If you like in a big city, like look at Manhattan, it's like the ultimate like concrete jungle, but there's Central Park. But even any city that we've been around in the country, there's going to be some green space. So it may not be massive, it may be simple, but that's all right. Researchers show that even pictures of nature have a similar benefit. So if you really can't find any green space, or if it's not within walking distance, then look at pictures. Or another idea is like get some low cost like plants in your house and bringing some plants into your home.
Yeah.
Bringing like maybe like a water feature, or bringing even like
crystals.
Bringing crystals,
Rocks.
bringing rocks, bringing some like what I call God art into your house or apartment. That's a good idea. And even like to use tech in a positive way like this, downloading like nature sounds or like meditative nature sounds. And it's not the same thing, but it's really great if you have to be in sort of an urban environment. And even if you don't live in an urban environment, it's still, when you are inside, these are tools that can be great.
Yeah. Have you heard about the sheep that they cloned? They cloned it a while ago. Yeah.
No, I haven't.
They cloned a sheep, like straight up cloned an entire sheep.
Wow.
They gave it a name. I think it was like Dolly or something.
Oh yes, I heard this. This isn't new.
No, it's old. But
yeah.
Do you think that they can clone humans?
Well, I mean, look, time will tell. I don't know how successful they've been with that, but I'm sure with time, they probably can do it already.
I think if they can clone a sheep, that they could clone a human.
Yeah.
It's pretty freaky.
It is. I mean, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, they can probably do a lot, whether it's out in the public, widely accessible, or talked about, who knows?
They have these businesses that like you can pay like 30 grand and they'll clone your dog for you.
Hey, I will do that with Scout and Harper.
Those are our dogs, for those of you who don't know. He loves them more than any of us. Okay. Now I'm going to start grilling you a little bit about my generation. What do you think of my generation? Okay. So what do you think is my generation's biggest strength or strengths?
I think that you think outside the box, and you're not limited by cultural norms as much, which is, it can be a great thing.
Okay. Any others or specific?
I mean, that alone will influence so many different spheres of life, right? That alone will impact society, depending on who you're talking about within your generation, in a myriad of different ways. So that's the one that comes to mind. And I feel like in some ways, I mean, I don't know, I think that my generation and the generations after us, we are increasingly interested in health and wellness, which I think is good. So I think that the Gen X, I'm considered a millennial, like an older millennial, but the Gen X and the baby boomers before us certainly there are many exceptions to this, but generally speaking, I feel like they were that old sort of either not interested in health and wellness at all, or it was that very archaic sort of dieting culture, right? Of just like eat less, be like starve yourself, like eat your three square meals a day. And it was so much of like backwards information about nutrition. So I think really focusing on nourishing yourself and being healthy and how you feel more than just sort of this sort of superficial way that people should look. I think it's a positive thing. I think your generation's done it even better in many ways.
Well, thank you for that. I'll take it. What do you think is my generation's biggest weakness, or some of our biggest weakness?
What generation would you be considered?
I am a Gen Z. I'm a Z.
You're a B to Z?
I'm a really, not really late, but I'm
really
like
young
mid
Gen
to
Z.
late Z. Yeah. I think the oldest Zs are like 22 right now.
Really?
Yeah, like 20s, in their 20s.
Yeah, like even mid 20s.
Yeah. And then, okay, you want to hear something crazy? The next generation, they're being called Gen Alpha. Because they go through the Greek alphabet, like they go through the Greek alphabet, like going down. And then we're at Z now, so we go to...
Was there a Generation Y?
No, the Greek alphabet. They don't have... They missed... We went from like whatever the boomers... I don't know.
I don't know how it works, but yeah. Okay.
Alphas. That's funny. That they're just gonna like...
Restarted.
Yeah, pretty much.
The rebirth of society.
The rebirth of... Yeah, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. These are the biggest what? Weaknesses. I think there's a lack of resilience.
Totally.
Hugely. And not just in that generation, I'd say in mine too, but increasingly, I feel like since the 1970s probably, there was an increasingly like lack of resilience with every decade.
It just got worse. And they say strong men create easy times create weak men create hard times, and then hard times create strong men. And then well, it could go for people in general. And it's like the cycle, and that's exactly what you're talking about. It's this like slow deterioration of resilience and strength in people. And because we don't really need to do anything in our lives. We need to eat and drink, and that's it. We need to eat, drink water, that's it. That's all we need. And with that life, like, you don't have to really go get shelter, because like your parents probably will provide for you if you can't. And getting money is really easy, and it's like there's no like struggle or passion to life. But the resilience, totally.
I would say that's something that comes to mind. And I think that sometimes we confuse the word love, and compassion. And sometimes love and compassion involve giving tough love, right? And telling people things they don't want to hear, and calling them up to something better. So, I mean, that's a tough thing sometimes, striking that balance. But I think that's something that your generation may have a tougher time with as well.
And I think that's what we need to figure out as just a society in general, is that like right now I feel like society they're so scared of the tough love and saying the hard things, because in the past there have been a lot of people who called abuse tough love, and it wasn't tough love, it was abuse. They were harsh and rude, and they hurt people, and now they're so wounded and scared, and they're living out of those wounds. And now it's like, if you say anything that could be taken offensive in any way, shape, or form, you're done. And I think now it's just like there are the two scales, and what needs to happen is we need to figure out the middle, and that middle is what you're talking about, that tough love, that I love you, but this is not okay. This is messed up. We need to fix this. It doesn't mean that I don't love you, but I love you so much that I'm gonna help you. And I think that's essential to.
It's not always how it looks, but it's needed in every human to human relationship at some point.
Yeah, and you can't just like go to anyone on the street and be like, "You're doing this," and that's where that like not necessarily abuse, but abuse comes in.
Abusive
Relationship, because you have to build a relationship with someone to start like giving them advice and trying to help them make their life better.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think social media and our phones play? Like, what role do they play in our lives as the next generation and as your generation and just overall as people?
Well, I mean, I grew up without a smartphone, right? So I was the first generation where I really had my childhood without a phone and my early 20s with a smartphone. So I was like 21, I think, whenever smartphones came out. And I remember I was in college and in postdoc, like in my doctorate in college. And I remember a few guys in my class had it and they're like, "Oh, so-and-so has an iPhone." And everyone was like huddled around this phone called an iPhone. And that was the first time I thought, "Oh, that's weird. Like, what's that?" I had this like whatever flip phone, Razor, whatever. And I thought, it didn't even appeal to me. It took years before I even got an iPhone because I had Android and whatever. It just, anyways, I'm sort of resistant to. I want to beat to my own drum.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
an iPhone when you want an iPhone.
That's right. I'm not going to do it because culture tells me to do it when I want it, and I got a green one.
Yeah.
And that's when I got it.
Keep your Samsung and get an iPhone whenever you feel like it. Even though iPhones are superior, I do believe.
I would no, and I would agree with you. With having one, they are great. I love them. So I would say that I at least had 20 something years without that inundation. And the generations after us really didn't get that chance. I mean, we gave that to you guys because we didn't give you things until really late.
I didn't get it until the pandemic.
But you didn't have social media until you were 16 years old.
Yeah, and even then it was like a drip, and I liked that because you gave me like the crappiest social medias like Facebook, and which I still have never used to this day, but you gave it to me, and I had access to that, and I got to use the self-control of like, no, I've spent too much time on it, or I'm not going to use it at all. Like, I don't have TikTok. I don't, and I never will.
You don't have TikTok. You don't have Snapchat. You don't have
Snapchat. Oh, we could get into Snapchat, but TikTok I think is like crack. That's how I view TikTok. Like, their algorithm is so good that it's like it's a drug. It can become a drug because they literally can read your mind and they know exactly what you want. And if you can get exactly what you want at the click of a button, that's not good.
Yeah, it's rewiring the way that our brain works.
It's an addiction in a way.
Yeah, it's cheap dopamine hit for many people, and it's FOMO-inducing content that's there. But
and growing up with that click dopamine hit, it's just like, oh, button, and then you feel better, but you don't.
The Pixar film WALL-E is prophetic, and that's all I'll say about that. So what's the difference? I think that we had a chance for our brains to form the way that humans would ancestrally would have, and in many ways, the kids that grew up with just social media from birth, their brain it's a hybrid brain. It's like the human brain plus an algorithm controlling it. Or an algorithm influencing it at the very least.
Yeah. We're getting to see what happens now. The iPad kids are growing up, and we get to see what they're like. And it's a little freaky. It's not the greatest. I know some iPad kids that are doing okay.
Yeah, and it has some benefits, right? But I think it probably has more drawbacks than benefits. I would assume so. And it's like, look, the U.S. Surgeon General said in the past year, he said a few times, but that kids under the age of 14 shouldn't be on social media at all. That's what he said.
Mm.
This is the U.S. Surgeon General, which is, they have anybody in that position notoriously has to have a well measured, reserved statement on these sort of things.
Especially to something that like makes a ton of money. This is
Right.
like one of the biggest
Influential
Yeah.
sectors of our society. Absolutely.
And if he's like, nah. Like,
So if he's saying 14, my thought is, what's the actual age?
Yeah, seriously.
So,
Like 40.
yeah, I should just be getting a phone right now.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, well, you're a very successful person, and I want to ask you, what do you think success is? What is success to you?
Well, I think there's an outer success and an inner success, right? The outer success, lots of people can have that, right? Even though lots of people don't. But it can look in different ways for different people. But if you're looking at this sort of general outer success, it's going to look like outer abundance, right? It's going to be having things, having resources, not needing, having freedom. I think freedom and the sort of currency and energy of abundance in their life. And that looks, yes, financial is a part of it, but ultimately it's so much more than that. I think it's just the freedom, because some people don't have a lot of money, but they have a lot of, like, their overhead is lower and they live just a free, flexible life.
Mhm.
I think that's what success is. It's sort of an energy and a sort of a metaphysical currency that, but ultimately, I think that the outer success is a trap and a source of misery and disappointment and despair if you don't have inner success.
Mm.
And I think you can have outer success without inner success. And you can have inner success without outer success. But I think the real secret is to have both.
Mm.
And almost have outer success as a natural manifestation, a ripple effect of inner success.
Mhm.
So that's what I've always tried to do, is like get my real, authentic, core spiritual stuff, metaphysical stuff, like things that matter down right, and be in my own path and just be a channel for God's light. And then if I stay in my lane, so to speak, what can come out of that? What can grow from that?
Mhm.
Who knows what it'll look like? I didn't really even have, like, a lot of people have like their vision boards and what they want to make. I still like don't think about what I can make, or I don't even know honestly what I make. But it's like, to me, it's like, can I live a life of abundance?
Mhm.
Can I help people? Can I live a freedom filled life with myself and my family? That's what I want. These are qualities that don't have a price, actually. They don't have a price. They're priceless.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. I mean, Justin Bieber, I heard him talk about on a podcast once. I mean, he's a dude who literally could have anything he wanted at the snap of a finger.
Mhm.
And he said, I don't care that I live in a big house. I don't care about cars. I don't care about watches. I don't care about clothes. He's like, my favorite thing to do in a day is get out in my backyard and sit on the grass and watch hummingbirds suck nectar out of flowers. He was like, you can't buy that.
Mhm.
You can't buy that experience of being able to go sit in nature and look at nature. And that's kind of goes back to the forest bathing thing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's the most fulfilling things in life, and the things that you should be most grateful for are the things that you came into this earth with: your health,
Mhm.
your life, the ability to love, the ability to be loved, nature, the ability to enjoy nature.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's true success.
Well said. I
Yeah.
agree with that.
What are
Wholeheartedly.
some practices that helped you succeed and that you think could be helpful to listeners?
I would say be back to my earlier statement of being a channel. I think instead of comparing yourself to other people, stay in your lane. That can be used as such a derogatory term. Like people, I think of it as like, well, when actors get into music or musicians get into actors, they say, "Oh, stay in your lane." That's used very derogatorily. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, stay in your lane is like, what is your calling? What is your passion? What is your why? And what is the vehicle in which that why and passion will come into play? And knowing that, and then being relentlessly consistent and loyal to that it's in a way, it's the power of intention. It's the power of intention and the power of focus, the power and the sort of the law of attraction in many ways. I feel like there's something to all of that.
Yeah.
And I would say that is it. That is it. That is it. And but ultimately it has to be done in accordance with the laws of the universe, meaning some sort of part of the greater good of the whole, which is what I mean about outer success. Because I think people can have outer success, quote unquote, outer success, without doing that. I think of a lot of really corrupt, wealthy people. I think of even like someone like Donald Trump, and even though I don't know him, but like Donald Trump and people like that from all intents and purposes, if you should know someone by their fruits, I think there's a outer success, but I don't know how much inner success someone like that has. And I'm not just speaking on him. I'm saying a whole industry of people, a whole culture of people. Totally. And so to me, it's like, I don't want that. I really don't want that. I don't want that at all. I would rather live a simple life with joy and my family, but have freedom than have any quote unquote material outer success. So I would say just apply the law of attraction in your life. And part of that staying in your lane and being consistent and relentless in that focus. That there's a word, in Hebrew, it's kavanot, kavanah. Kavanot is just basically this like intense intention, almost like a meditation, and making your life a meditation. Because I really do think it manifests things in your life.
Yeah. What do you attribute? Actually, no, I want to dive into, you talked about this like relentless pursuit and this consistency, and you said something that my generation struggles with is this kind of lack of motivation and just kind of sitting back on the couch and sitting on our phones because it's easier. We get we want to be successful. We want to have all the nice things because everyone else does, and it's that whole fear of missing out thing. But it's also going to be really hard to get there, so we might as well just sit on our phones and look at the people who do have that. And I think it's scary, and I think it's a huge problem for my generation and even your generation too. It's like, I'm scared, I don't want to, so I'm just going to sit on the couch and look at people who do have what I wish I had. And what do you think are some tips for people that have a dream, they want to do something, but they don't really have the motivation to?
Well, I would say do things in your life that limit distraction. And distraction is geared like so much part of our culture, but like really setting healthy boundaries with your phone.
Screen time, 100%.
And also like be voracious in reading a physical book. Like just like reading as many books as you can, and read inspirational books, read books that are going to be edifying and in alignment with that law of attraction that I talked about earlier for you. And there's no replacement. And people say, well, I'm not good at reading books, or I'm not a reader. That's why you should do it. It's because your brain is so distracted that you can't, that muscle of focus is weak. It's like saying the gym isn't for me, right? Well, it's not good for anybody until you make it a practice. And so I think that's it. And then bring in things where you can create stillness in your life so you can get divine inspiration and you could be a better version of yourself and regulate your nervous system. So things like meditation, breath work, getting out in nature, forest bathing are very keys to get out of your head and into your body.
Yeah.
And also, I would say focus on the foods you're having. Like if you're fatigued and brain fogged or anxious or depressed, look at the foods that are contributing to that, and really look at sugar and refined grains and gluten containing grains and industrial seed oils, too much dairy, conventional dairy. That's going to create any fatigue and lethargy and sort of a lack of zest for life in any human being, no matter what generation they're in.
And I hear a lot of people my age and around my age, they're like, oh, I struggle with sleeping. Like, I stayed up till 2 a.m. last night. Well, what did you do? And they're like, well, I was on my phone and then I tried to go to sleep and then I couldn't. So I just sat on TikTok for a couple hours thinking that would make me tired. And I was tired and then I tried to fall asleep and then I couldn't. So I played some video games and then I was so exhausted at 2 a.m. that I literally just fell asleep playing video games. And it's like, I tell them, I'm like, why don't you like read a book?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's boring. And I was like, isn't it true that reading a book boosts melatonin? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that having to look at, like, focus on these words and look at them, especially if they're not on a screen, like a physical, tangible book, it makes you tired. Like if I want to go sleep fast, I read a book.
Yeah, and especially in our culture, I think, because it isn't so dopamine rushing, and it's not the blue light, and it's not sort of that cortisol, endorphins all the time. That sympathetic aspect of our nervous system is always go. So yeah, anything that modulates our nervous system and our endocrine system in a way of like sort of resting, digesting, that parasympathetic aspect of our autonomic nervous system. Yeah, it makes sense. And I would, at the very least, for anybody that's listening to this, watching this, to allow about 2 hours or so after, allow 2 hours of being tech free before bed. And then if you can't do it some nights, like, still no excuses, like do it most nights, at least 2 hours. It could be more, it should be more, but you can always get blue light blocking glasses and other things that can mitigate the blue light, which will impact your sleep wake cycle and your cortisol melatonin cycle.
Yeah. You have so much wisdom, and I mean, seriously. Saying that for my dad is kind of weird because, like, I disagree with you on some stuff, like on a father-son thing, but in this, it's like you really, I mean, even in my life, you've really, even though sometimes I haven't wanted to hear it, you push me and you want me to succeed, not in like, you have to succeed kind of way, but you just have like given me these, I don't know, these habits that I'm like, I take advantage of, and I'm like, or I don't even understand the worth of it, but then I see other people and I'm like, you don't read before you go to bed? You don't take supplements? You don't eat healthy? What's going on? And it's like, I think people need to hear this, and I think this is why this episode is so important, and this is why this episode is the first episode. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that, my sweet boy. I love you.
What do you attribute to your success?
I would say God and you guys. Yeah, God and my family. Yeah.
What do you think the role religion plays in happiness, and not even being Christian, but just religion overall? What do you think? What role do you think it plays in?
Well, I don't, you and I have had this conversation. I think that it's not necessarily religion that does it. I think there are spiritual principles that can be within religion that do it. And actually, on my podcast, shout out to Art of Being Well, you could listen
Shameless
to it.
plug.
Shameless plug. I've had some amazing researchers and academic people from, Columbia and all the different sort of collegiate research institutions actually look at this. And what they found is, yes, there can be people that are religious that have these practices of like cultivating joy and community and something bigger than themselves, and altruism and kindness and forgiveness.
Yeah.
These are things that are shown to that are associated in the research with living a longer, healthier, more meaningful life.
Mhm.
So there can be people that are atheistic, or let's just say agnostic, probably, that have a lot of those principles
Mhm.
in their life.
Totally.
And there are people that are in churches and synagogues and mosques that really don't have any of those qualities.
Yeah.
So I
that's true.
don't think that it's the religion or the orthodoxy that actually cultivates that. It's a lot of times the teachings and the philosophy, when practiced, can cultivate that.
Yeah, it's like the pursuit of something bigger than yourself. Because
Yeah.
if you are the thing,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a life that's unfulfilling. And I
Mhm.
think over history, everyone has pursued something that's bigger than themselves, whether it's the universe or it's love or it's forgiving people or it's
Yeah.
it's meditating and being as good of a servant to people as you possibly can.
Yeah.
I think it's huge, and I think that
Mhm.
it's a really important part of enjoying this human experience that we have.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So to finish off this podcast with one last question, what is your biggest life advice?
I would say my biggest life advice is life is a beautiful, immersive vapor. So breathe it in deeply, because I look back in my life and I just think of how quickly time has gone by and just years fold into themselves. That's why even just practicing things like gratitude and present moment awareness and soaking in this moment that we have is so important. Because I look back at pictures. There's a picture that grandma showed me of you. We talked about it. She sent it to you too. Of you in a cardboard bucket or a cardboard box. We were living here and outside of LA, and pushing. I was pushing you around in the front yard. I don't even remember that. And it's like you look back in different seasons of your life, and it's like a completely different person lived that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say my biggest advice would just be soak it in. Culture is so geared towards distracting us and looking to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, that we don't ever just appreciate the here and now.
Mm.
So that's my advice.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And
First guest, I feel honored.
first guest, maybe the best guest. We can't say yet, but
so much to see.
So much to see.
I think I set the bar pretty high.
You did,
if nothing else.
Yeah, we're gonna need some high quality peeps on the podcast to beat this. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, subscribe. If you hated it, subscribe. And yeah, thank you. Let us know any suggestions that you have, and talk to you later. Bye.